What's on your mind today?
Do you know these people who are just triggering you? Like you're, you kind of have to press your teeth together. So you're like, oh, again. Why is she triggering me? Why is he triggering me? That can be, I don't know, that can be like the teacher of your kid or your neighbor, or it can be a colleague, or it can also be like a friend, or it can be your mother-in-law. I think that's a common one. Like, and this person is triggering you over and over and over again. And you kind of have these thoughts like, why don't you change? Why don't you change? And it has nothing to do with the other person. It has everything to do with you, and it has nothing to do with the other person. And that's unfortunate news. Also good news, because you can change something. You cannot change, but there's a saying, you cannot change the people around you, but you can change the people around you, by the way. So that's not what I want to talk about, but it just reminded me. So who's triggering you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say that's bullshit because it's all about the other person. It has to be about the other person because how can it be about me? How can it be about me? The,
I
the other the other person is my ex. So I'm pretty passionate about this that it's not me.
yeah,
God
I'm
damn it.
unfortunate. sorry sorry to tell you it has something to do with that, and that's something that people literally don't understand. They're like, how can it have something to do with me? It's the behavior of the other person. Like, the other person is having a shitty behavior, it has nothing to do with me. So first of all, what is, do you want to talk about this here?
Yeah, I do actually. I do want to talk
Okay.
about it because I got to tell you this because it probably took me like 5 years just to figure out that I was getting triggered, just to figure out like because you just kind of go through your life and then you're like, oh, that person is such a dick or whatever, or that person is such a bitch, and like or like fuck them and they're whatever, and you just your whole day is just like, yeah, that fucking, and you don't really think about what's actually happening in there. So it took me about 5 years just to figure out that I was getting triggered. And this is the worst part. The worst part is 75% of the time when I had this experience, when I was pissed off for the whole day, she wasn't even there. When I realized that, that's when I realized, like, what
Hmm.
is this bullshit? Like, she's not even here and I'm pissed off. How can she ruin my whole day when I didn't even talk to her today? God damn it. Then I was really pissed off because I was like, how did this happen? How did this person have that much power over me over the course of my day? This is bullshit.
And why,
And
who is giving the power away? Who's taking or giving the power?
stop that.
Is she taking power away from you, or are you giving
So
power to her?
so eventually, once I realized that I was getting triggered, and once I realized that she wasn't even there 3/4 of the time when it was happening, then the only logical conclusion that you can make from that is that it's you. And that's not to say that I blamed myself for getting triggered. I didn't blame myself for being angry. I didn't blame myself for ruining my own whole day. But instead, I took responsibility. And when you make that, it sounds like a tiny adjustment, and maybe it is a tiny adjustment, but the difference between taking the blame and taking the responsibility is massive in what you actually do from there. So I took the responsibility for my own life and I said, if I'm going to have happy days in my life, then I have to do something about this. I have to do something about it. And it doesn't matter that it is the way it is. It doesn't matter that, that it happened in the past. All that matters is that right now, how do I want my life to be? and that's taking responsibility for your life. What about you? Did you ever have any triggers?
Yes, yes, I have triggers and I'm dealing with them every day. Um, People are triggering, so-called victims are triggering me. So especially women with these, I don't know how to frame it in English, the me voice. The this is triggering me extremely. This is triggering me extremely. And I have to admit, I am a very controlled person for my life. I'm not controlling others, but I'm controlling my life. I take responsibility for a lot of things. I don't like to give the power away. I don't like to be, I want to reframe this here. I haven't, or most of my life, I didn't allow me to be in a feminine energy because of fear of getting attacked. So I built like a protection ring, I would call it, around me. And so people who are in this extreme me state, how would you say that in English? Like,
I'm not let me see. Well, it's definitely a selfish emotion as opposed to a selfless emotion. So like there's selfish emotions and selfless emotions. Like selfish emotions are, well, the purpose of selfish emotions is to try to help yourself heal from an immediate recent wound that happens, but sometimes they get stuck and you just live in that selfish emotion for the rest of your life, even though nothing's has happened to you. But so it's things like sadness and pain is a selfish emotion. I think anxiety is a selfish emotion, probably. I'm not saying the word selfish in a negative context because, as I said, it has a purpose. It's just when it's being used outside of that purpose when it becomes inappropriate. That's like the whole inner game of life is like having the appropriate motion at the appropriate time, right? I don't know. But so your question was, is there a name for it?
no, the me is something, I was looking for that word. There must be an equivalent in English. That's a me. Those women who are like Maisie, I don't know if you would kind of
Mm,
call it like this. They're
mm,
like, oh, I'm so sad. No, 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 no. These women trigger me a lot, and I meet them every day. Like a lot of people, I feel it's like you described selfish and selfless. And I feel we all have traumatic experiences in our life, and there is no bigger traumatic experience or a smaller traumatic experience. This does not exist, in my opinion. It doesn't matter if you got raped like I was, or if your kindergarten teachers slapped you, or if you have a complicated relationship to your older brother who kind of tortured you and teased you your life. So this is all the same. It's an experience that we make that has a result, basically. And I think everyone is kind of traumatized from his childhood because parents do the best they can, but our parents were also raised by their parents, and this is a different century that this education comes from. So it kind of gets passed down from generation to generation. And if you don't break the cycle, we all have traumas and we all have to go through traumas. So that's why trauma healing is, in my humble opinion, the most important issue of coaching. Because if you don't heal your traumas, you pass them on to the next generation. And this is very important to mothers. Like, hey, you don't want to pass on your trauma to your kids. Like you don't want them to suffer from the same problems that you had. And oftentimes it goes like this. Um, for example, a grandmother is very calm because she was told not to get so much attention. Then the daughter is very, or so it's the granny and the mother and the daughter. That's how it is. So the grandmother is very calm. So she learned not to take too much attention. Then the mother is oftentimes a rebel and she kind of goes out there, and because the grandmother wants her daughter to be happier. And then this goes on to the next generation because the mother is making traumatic experience in being a rebel. She kind of teaches her daughter again to be more to get no attention, to be more calm. So this is a cycle that goes on and on and on until you break it. So trauma healing, if you guys have some unresolved trauma and you have kids, you better look into that before. Optimum would be before they get 10. So you can change something.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I also completely agree that I think that almost everyone has trauma. I definitely would say that it is not, you're probably in the majority if you have trauma of some sort. And I don't want like I I I don't want for it to become some overused term or whatever, which maybe it already has. But because I think what's important is not to label yourself as someone who has trauma, but what's important is to acknowledge that it happened and then heal from it.
Mhm.
That's what's important. I never would have believed or said that the things that happened to me were traumatic until I realized that it was affecting my life. When you find yourself, when you think you're alone and you're having an argument with someone that's not there, and it's just going on for like 10 minutes, and you're just like, it's in your head, so you're not actually speaking it. But then, so this was happening to me intermittently, not not multiple times a day probably, but multiple times a week. And I didn't think too much of it because I just thought, well, that person pissed me off or that situation pissed me off from my past. I knew it was about my past because I was literally going back into my past and reliving some things and like having arguments and raging on people in my head. At least I thought it was in my head until one day I turned around in the middle of one of these things and my daughter was standing there and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "What?" She's like, "Your lips were moving." And I was like, "Holy shit." I didn't it didn't come out vocally, but I literally was like mouthing the words as I was like in this fantasy rage that I was having. God. And so that was a real eye opener for me. And I was like, I got to do something about this. So I don't do that anymore. I did something about it. That doesn't mean that, holy miracle, I'm cured. It just means that I really took the sharp edges off it. So now it doesn't control my life. It doesn't affect my life on a daily basis, I wouldn't say. Would you say, do you think that on a daily basis that my life is experience is affected by that?
No, no, it's not. Like you changed a lot here. You changed so much. Like you did the work there.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I thought it was going to be hard. And it's kind of weird how the subconscious mind works. And we don't really realize it, but that's kind of the whole point. That's why it's called the subconscious and not the conscious. You're not aware of it. And so some of the techniques that I did, I didn't know if anything happened until a week later, a month later, like, and then I was like, that worked.
Yeah, that's what I use in coaching and what you use in coaching. It's so-called recoding techniques. That means you're recoding something in your subconscious, which is not the effect. The effect can be there immediately, but it can also take some time.
Yeah, and the reason why I didn't know whether it worked or not wasn't because it took time, because it was probably pretty much instantaneous. It's just that the situation didn't come up again. The trigger didn't come up again for another few days or whatever. And that's when I realized. It wasn't until I was in a situation where I was like, normally I spend the rest of the day raging at the wall about this, and I'm not. And I'm good with it. Like I'm really good with it. And that's when I knew.
Yeah, I think we talked about that one day that you told me about. It's like your head is like a big library and you kind of go in there and you take out a book and you kind of relabel it. You take out that book and normally when you were reading it, you got scared or you have had fears or anger or sadness and you're kind of relabeling it and bring it to another shelf. It gets a new cover and it comes to the shelf of I take the wisdom out of the book, but not the emotions.
Right. Yeah. The first thing that I started doing on myself was the emotional evaporation. And that's just like a technique to get you through the day. I literally used to rage at the wall for nearly the whole day, on and off, but I would be like in a completely subconscious state for like 10 minutes and not even know what I had done in the last 10 minutes. I never caused any damage or anything like that, but I like just raging at the wall and then so angry afterwards, like when I sort of came out of it, still like all that rage in my body and just just angry and not knowing what to do, not knowing um what I was supposed to be doing. It just like completely disrupted my flow if I was in, working on something. And so it was very disruptive. And but I started doing this process and then so immediately as soon as I noticed that, oh God, I'm triggered by whatever, it doesn't even matter what the trigger is. Then I would do this process of emotional evaporation. And then that really like took it away. So it didn't just like keep bothering me for the rest of the day.
And you did a really good job. Like, I'm so proud of you. And you did that, like, you did it alone, like, you did it with yourself. And so, this is also when I talk about that, so this trauma that you had, that you worked on, also influenced your relationships. Like, not the one with me because you worked on it, but like, this is like that behavior that you developed coming from some sort of trauma influences everything, your relationships, your life. And to be honest, if you have a trauma resulting from a relationship and you're not solving it before you go into the next one, this will probably be the same catastrophe again.
Yeah, and in general, I would say healing yourself, everyone is responsible to heal themselves. Like like you can go see someone if you want, and you can have someone to help you and guide you through it. It could be a therapist or a psychotherapist or a hypnosis practitioner, or it could be Reiki, or it could be like any of the, you can get a whole team of people to help you through it. But who's responsible for your healing is you. It has to be you. Because if you don't take responsibility for your own healing, you can go see anybody and it ain't going to happen. It doesn't happen without you. So you have to be brave enough to say that I am going to do whatever it takes to change this. That's what I'm so proud of you for, because all the work we did together is none of that could have happened the way that it happened if you didn't take that and just say like, I'm not going to let this define me. This is not who I am. This is just a thing that happened and I'm not going to let it ruin the rest of my life. I'm so proud of you for that.
And I'm not gonna let it ruin this relationship. I was just thinking about, like, if you have, like, it's wonderful to find your soulmate. It's wonderful to attract the partner who loves you exactly like you are, and you have to do the work. Like, in my case, my brain was kind of splattered into different identities, which is normal after such a traumatic experience. And my work was to bring them all together again. And yeah, thank you.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so that's kind of like the second thing that I was going to touch on too, was that while healing from trauma is kind of inherently a selfish activity in a way, because it's about healing yourself, but it's not really completely selfish because you have something to give to others, not just in your intimate relationship, not just to your kids, not just to your parents, not just to your brothers and sisters, cousins, aunts and uncles, or your friends, but to the world. You have something inside of you. Everyone does. Everyone has more to give to the world. And we're at a time when we need it. We all need it. And it's thankfully, it's kind of happening. There's kind of this global awareness and global raising of consciousness. This generation, I was saying a couple weeks ago, this generation knows more about psychology than my generation knew 5 years ago. We're all kind of learning together at the same time, I guess, which is great. So you can be selfish and take the time and the energy to heal. And it's okay because it's going to allow you to give 10 times that back to the world, 100 times that back to the world. You can't even measure. My goodness, I look at what has come out of you just in that time. And I think some of that was going to come anyways, but wow. Uh, just wow. Like,
It
like,
would have never came out of me. Never. I know my
like,
life before I healed. So maybe that's just nice to hear. So my life before I healed my trauma was a life of numbing. So I used everything to numb myself to survive my life. So you're wasting years and years and years if you're numbing yourself. And with numbing, I don't mean, so in my case it was drugs, but this can be also shopping, this can be food, this can be drama. Drama is a form of numbing. You're so concentrated on the drama that you're not living a happy life, and you're not here to live a dramatic life. You're also not here to live under that fog, I want to call it brain fog of numbing. Like you're not really living, you're just surviving. And I know myself. I was in that luxury industry and I was just doing my days, and it was all about being the slimmest and being the most beautiful person and all that. There was no real value to my life, I have to admit. And the life that I'm living today after healing my trauma, you cannot compare it. I'm a different person. And and this is not happening for everyone, but I changed my whole life. Like when I healed, while healing my trauma, I left a relationship which was okay, but it was just okay. It didn't make me happy. I also left my country where I lived, and I left my job. So I created myself a complete new life, and the life now. So you can see a result. What trauma healing can bring to your life is we're doing six figures with our company, which was founded 2.5 years ago. We're living together. We have houses on both sides of the ocean. We're having 5 kids. We're having good relationships with our family members. So everything changed. I found the soulmate, like everyone is talking about, like the soulmate, literally. And you can have that too, but you have to do the work. And so, yes, there is always an opportunity to like get a self-hypnosis session. And I think we have one too. So you can contact us and you get it. And you have to have someone who holds you accountable for that. You have to someone who guides you through that process, because self-hypnosis is always possible, but it's a process that you have to learn. It's not working from one day to another. It's something that can be either guided, that goes faster, or you learn how to do it, but you have to learn it. So, yeah, it's so worth to do the work. Like I'm living in Canada. I lived in Germany, now I'm living in Canada. And I'm having the best time of my life because I went through that healing process.
Yeah, it's so important. And I really want to create ways for people to be able to do this work on their own, in their own way, in their own time. But I also have to have a massive disclaimer there. If you are having now, or if in the future you have suicidal thoughts, you really, really need to reach out to someone. Get someone to hold your hand a little bit and make sure that you don't fall off the rails, because sometimes with this kind of work you can get lost. But for the most part, for most people, they can do a substantial amount of work on their own, and most people are, I think, are probably more comfortable doing it that way. It just depends on, like, the way that you and I did it. We're in an intimate relationship. Maybe that's what we should do. We should teach partners how to do it, but one way or the other. But not everyone has a partner anyways. And if they do, their partner may not know or may not want to know
Yeah,
how to support
it
their partner.
I don't think it needs to be your partner, but it needs to be a partner, which means you need someone who's there for you and you can reach out to, and especially if you have suicidal thoughts. Because I can tell you here that I had many suicidal thoughts on the way. So you need to reach out to someone if you have that, because you will not be able to deal with that alone. This can be a good friend, that can be a coach who also gives you like a WhatsApp support, like who is willing to say, okay, I'm here for you in an emergency. This can be a therapist. Trauma healing is something that goes deep, and yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah. And so the techniques that I'm gonna offer in recorded form are techniques just to help you um to do things as painlessly as possible with. And so those are things that you can do on the daily basis. But a lot of people, most people, have some really, really deep work to do, and I guess that's what we're trying to say. You need some guidance for that,
Mhm.
because it's easy to get lost in the weeds.